of the three institutions has been to contribute towards ensuring that in very concrete and material terms, those on the margins of our society are not left behind. My name is Briggs Bomba. I am the Programs Director for Trust Africa, and I am honored to be serving as a facilitator or moderator for our conversation today. And today on our panel, we have the principals of the three organizations. We have Maseho Matswamuse, who is the CEO of Southern Africa Trust. We have Stigmata, who is the CEO of the African Philanthropy Network. And we have Ebrima Sal, who is the CEO of Trust Africa. The three of them are going to be leading us in a conversation around some of the issues that we've already introduced. So without much further ado, I would like to invite, starting with Maseho, just some opening remarks. Why community immunity? What are you trying to get across? What are you trying to communicate by community immunity?
Avant un message personnel à Briggs pour dire que les gens veulent voir ça dans le visage.
Over to you, Maseko.
No, we're starting with Stigmata. Sorry, that's what I was.
Would you mind if I respond to this one?
All right.
Allow me to respond to this one because I will not be able to stay until the end. So thank you so very much. And hi, everyone. Thank you so very much for joining us this afternoon for some of the countries in East and Southern Africa, but also good day for those who are coming from other parts of Africa, and good morning for those who are coming from the US and so forth. Thank you so very much, Briggs, for introducing the community immunity to the audience. And thank you for your flexibility to allow me to, at least to come first. And as you have correctly said, this is a campaign. It's a campaign, advocacy campaign that we believed it was important to put together to be able to respond to the panic that most of us face. And this was especially in March, from beginning of March towards end of March. We were all in a panic. We were all, we all had to face COVID-19 outbreak, something that we never expected. And we all had to face some of the government put measures of lockdowns. Some had partial lockdowns, some had underwent fully lockdowns. Some did not underwent any lockdowns, but most of our government came with the response to COVID-19 because it was a pandemic which required the rapid response from our governments. And immediately after, as you could see, in most of the government responses, the marginalized groups and the vulnerable groups were left out. We could not see how much they are being targeted by the responses which we saw through the government and even through some of the regional bodies in the continent. So for us, it was quickly to say, what is it that we could do, being the organization which that are working on the continent. We cut across the entire continent, really, because when we say we, the organization who have co-created community immunity, it was then because we said no one is safe before we are all safe. And we had really noted that until everyone is equal, then equally able to respond to this pandemic, then our goal and our communities will never be able to recover. So it was the Southern Africa Trust, which is working with more than 250 organizations in the Southern Africa, movement, marginalized groups and social movements. It is the Trust Africa, which is working on the entire continent, also touching the lives of people through the civil society organization, through the coalitions and also movements. It is the Africa Philanthropy Network, which is a network of organizations and individuals throughout the continent. And the members of the network are working with communities in the continent. But by the way, I should also mention here that Southern Africa Trust and Trust Africa are also members of the Africa Philanthropy Network. So for us, really, COVID-19, when it just hit and it affected everyone in different ways, but in all aspects of our lives, we were reminded that the fight against the marginalized in the community, in our communities, and the fight against poverty must be taken with renewed vigor. And immediately we realized that this call cannot be ignored. So we put together a campaign which had at its center a theory of change, which is looking to transform and bring the marginalized African voices together and influence policy responses to the pandemic at the national level and the different global spaces and the regional level. And we started coming together in April, looking at working through a different series of activities which will touch contractual, which are cultural contextualized, because we believe that the context in the continent is affected differently and other continents might be affected differently. And we start to say, how can we then put strategies that resonate with our communities and communities we serve in the continent. So at the commitment of the drive and the scale, the commitment here is to scale up the responses to COVID from where communities were really hit by COVID, but also looking into how we can build better after COVID. And we started with the first phase of the campaign. And we said at this first phase of the campaign, we will take on about 2 years, but are working together with communities, with partners to co-create a movement which will be continent-wide. A continent-wide movement which is looking to influence policies after post-COVID policies. And we started by focusing on 3 major areas or objectives, I'll call them, if you wish. One is to strengthen the community-based organizations and movements in the continent. Another one is providing the platform for dialogue and advocacy. And on this one, as many people have noted, we have really invested in community dialogues, community conversations and discussions on how are we implicated, what are the potential solutions, what are the communities doing to respond to their own situation. You have seen series of webinars conducted and organized by Trust Africa, by Southern Africa Trust, and by Africa Philanthropy Network, aiming to bring the issues of concern from the community level to the fore, so that everyone understands, and also our policymakers understand what is happening on the community. But also it was important for us to bring those conversations so that we can really celebrate the voices of the marginalized groups. And when I talk about the marginalized groups here, I really mean the young people, the women movements, cross-border traders, small-scale farmers, and so forth. But again, the last focus for this phase is for us to grow a broader partnership and a broader network of partners who will come from the entire continent. And some of them can come from beyond the continent. So here we are targeting partnerships with NGOs. We are targeting partnership with other civil society organizations or coalitions in the continent, which are really representing vulnerable groups and marginalized. We are really targeting to work also with social movements at the continental level, regional level, and globe, to see that we are able to achieve our goal. I wish really to say that the campaign that we are conducting has achieved a number of success, but it is not without any challenges. And really one of the major areas that we are very proud of is we have been able to launch the website. So there is a community immunity website, and each of you here listening to me and those whom you are going to debrief about this webinar can really log in, visit the website, touch the donate button, and you can become one of the sponsors and one of the partner for this broader movement and broader initiative which we have launched. But again, we have been really successful by having or attracting the talented artists from the continent who are very much ready to work with us as ambassadors. We have Baba Mal, a popular African musician and artist from Senegal, who agreed to become our ambassador for the campaign. And we have successfully conducted the first live streaming on the 5th of August. We are also organizing the second one on the 2nd of October. And on this one, we'll have Baba Mal, but Baba Mal will also be accompanied by other talented musicians from the continent. Kindly stay tuned for that. Another one, which we see it's a great success because we say we want to build a network of partners. We have attracted different partners, the partners who can give us small gifts and partners who can give us big gifts. And for this one, I really want to acknowledge the support, very generous support that was given to us by the Open Society Foundation. Thank you so very much. We are in conversation with other partners here to look for big gifts and also small gifts. And on this one, we really believe that the objectives and the work that is going to be done and platform which is going to be co-created by this organization in the continent will really touch the hearts of the many Africans to let them agree to donate. And you can donate cash, or you can also donate in kind. We understand and we believe that all Africans are philanthropists. And I think this is the time when Africans should mobilize and could come together in a collective power of solidarity to give in order to uplift the lives of the marginalized and uplift the lives of the vulnerable people, but also flatten the curve of poverty, which has really deepened the impact of COVID in our continent. I want to say that another group which we really want to focus and we are yet to reach is the group of corporate and the group of the high net worth philanthropists in the continent. But we are on our way. We are still finding different ways to touch to this group because we understand that they are there and they are very much ready to support the socio-economic development and to reduce inequalities in the continent. Yeah. But we haven't been able to unlock the potential on those slides. The last thing which I wanted to say, and this is to conclude, is that I've said we have started with the first phase to build a network of partners. But our expectation is at the end of this phase, we would have a community immunity mandate and the roadmap fully developed. We would have fully developed and driven by communities in the continent, not by any intellectuals, but by the communities themselves. And we want to have it be supported by a growing network of partners in the continent. And we hope it will be adopted and it will achieve considerable scale across the continent and at various levels of the society. So those are the reasons and where we are and what have we done to this far through the community immunity initiative.
Thank you, Stigmata. I hope you are able to hang around a little bit longer and engage any questions that may come. Would like to welcome those who've joined us since we've started. I'm seeing we have Indonesia in the house, Malawi, DRC, Senegal. It's not just Pan-African, it's quite a global community that is joining us today. So thank you for such a comprehensive introduction and overview of what community immunity is. And to colleagues who are listening, kindly utilize the chat function. If you have any questions that you want to pose, any areas for clarification, and then we'll be picking them up as we are going. I would like to move on to Masejo this time. And Masejo, if there is anything that you can add, and particularly let us in on why is this collaboration important for Southern Africa Trust. And it's a double-barreled question. Also, from the responses that we have seen in the last 6 months to this pandemic, what are we beginning to see as the possibilities for our collective ability to respond to crises like this as institutions such as Trust Africa, APN, SAT, and others. Over to you.
Thank you, Briggs. And this time, I think I'm ready to step in and respond to your question. Just to echo my sister Stigmata there, and to thank you all for joining us on this first webinar. For the Southern Africa Trust, working with communities and amplifying the voices of poor people to engage with policy processes in the region, it just made sense to us that we start to mobilize our constituencies, our partners, to influence how governments were thinking about the immediate response, but also to highlight the importance of energizing and mobilizing throughout the cycle of disaster planning and disaster responses. In the first month of the COVID pandemic hitting the world and the first cycle of lockdowns, we also quickly realized that it didn't make sense for us to work as a pocket in isolation from the rest of the continent. There were other organizations like Trust Africa who were mobilizing in a similar manner, who were trying to pool resources in terms of funding, in terms of technical resources, as well as direct support to communities who were doing similar work. The African Philanthropy Network was also mobilizing and documenting community responses and lessons that were emerging from the ground. So it only made sense that in a time where our resources were stretched, were far stretched, it made sense for us to collaborate and look at a Pan-African response. And as Stigmata says, in the first couple of months, it was just really to understand what the immediate impact was. And we spent a lot of time documenting the responses from the community side, what the governments were doing, what community foundations were doing, the needs on the ground, as well as the needs of civil society. And when we launched the Community Immunity Initiative, we had a clear understanding that the gains, looking at the complexity of the issues that we're dealing with, but also acknowledging that the vulnerabilities, the drivers of vulnerability to the COVID pandemic were not necessarily new, but they were exacerbating pre-existing vulnerabilities. And therefore, in the long-term thinking about what post-COVID recovery could look like, it would mean addressing those pre-existing vulnerabilities and drawing on the lessons that we have learned for the long-term planning. So we were deliberate that we didn't want this to be a short-term response, a short-term intervention that just connects communities to aid, but it needed to be a multi-year intervention where we can look at the short-term responses, the medium-term responses, and the long-term responses. So I think at this point, it's important for me to note what are the key issues that as a collective, as the community immunity partners, what are the key issues of the moment are we concerned about? What are the current issues that we are concerned about? there's a lot of talk about building back better, a lot of talk about bringing back a better normal, and a lot of talk about policy reform that our governments are pushing, aid partners are pushing. And in that process, we are highlighting a number of issues that have come up from the constituencies that we've been working closely with. And this is really around, firstly, in the short term, responding to the socio-economic impacts that we saw lockdown have. And these had to do with the immediate food insecurity that we saw in the continent, the fragility of our food security systems, and the unsustainable levels of hunger that we are seeing in our continent and in our various sub-regions. So we'd like to organize around how we respond to some of those issues. The other issue that is coming up is the issue around the loss of jobs. And here we're talking about jobs not just in the formal sector, but jobs within a context where the majority of economic activity is taking place in the informal sector. ILO and other partners already highlighted that Southern Africa as a collective had about 250 million people who were estimated to be active in the informal sector. And 45 million were at the risk of losing their incomes and at the risk of losing their jobs as a result of the pandemic. So even within that context, when we think about economic stimulus packages, when we think about packages that are responding to, providing a stimulus for the business sector, we are concerned about how we're going to be organizing the voices and even mapping where informal traders are situated, how they are organized, what their needs are, so that they can be part and parcel of the databases that are being used once the governments have made policy pronouncements. The other issue that is coming up has been how we think about social protection within the broader policy of social policy in the continent. And here, thinking about social protection, again, that can be extended, not just to those who are involved in the formal economy, but can be extended to your small-scale farmers that Stigmata spoke about, that can be extended to the informal traders, that can be extended to young people and women who largely find themselves in the self-employed sector. And we've been thinking through providing a space to organize the voices of these different economic groups to start to influence how governments are thinking about the reform of social protection. When does basic income grants, for instance, become a reasonable response, and a response that is a much more efficient way of redistributing, part of a redistribution agenda within the economic cycle. The other issue that has come up in the last 3 months that we've been implementing this initiative is one around access to information. Access to information during the disaster itself, but access to information in terms of policy responses and opportunities that governments have put in place, again, as part of the economic stimulus packages, as part of the recovery period. And within this context, even just how we are holding our webinar series here, one of the issues that comes up as quite urgent for our social movements and for the groups that work at the grassroots level is the issue around closing the digital divide. And this is something that is important for us to think about as we're mobilizing resources and mobilizing partnerships that are relevant to the constituencies that we're working with. I want to just end with the point around the lessons that we're learning. And I think placing emphasis in documenting lessons, in documenting community responses is even more urgent now as the rest of the world tries to grapple with a better understanding of how come it is that Africa was, was not affected by the COVID pandemic in the way that projections had assumed we would be affected. We saw a lot of innovation within the responses at the community level. We were able to identify the resilience of our community health systems, and a lot of innovation that is happening at local levels that often gets lost in the sea of information at a global level. So to surface the experiences and to surface the issues from the communities, the best practices, and what we need to think about when we are looking at building an inclusive recovery and rehabilitation going forward. So BRICS is just going back once again to that issue that Stigmata spoke about of amplifying voices, but amplifying voices of Africans as agents of change, not as a hopeless continent and one that has passive actors, but as agents of change with homegrown innovations that are taking place that just need a little bit of support to be upscaled.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Masejo. You already began to touch on what makes this initiative unique. Usually in disaster situations, it's about the Band-Aid to stop the bleeding, but you're talking short-term, medium-term, and long-term approaches. Really, it's about seizing on this moment as a moment pregnant with opportunities for transformation. So thank you for flagging that. I want to move to Ebrima and invite you to take us a little bit further on that path that Masejo had started. Why was this an important initiative for Trust Africa to be a part of? But also Masejo hinted on the normalized abnormal that characterized the pre-COVID-19 situation and how COVID-19 itself exposed these abnormalities. So from your perspective, can you speak just a little bit more about what is it that you were seeing that made it really important for this unique approach of community unity, immunity and solidarity amongst Pan-African institutions to take a center stage in seeking to shape the future? Over to you, Ebrima.
Thank you, Briggs. Thank you, everybody, and for being with us today. And thanks to my two sisters for having, already introduced the topic and dealt with many of the important points. Look, this is, there is power in being. I think that has been already underscored.
Ebrima, you've muted yourself.
Ebrima, you are muted. You are muted, Ebrima. Please unmute.
Am I unmuted? Is that okay? I'm not managing it myself, so I'm all right. I'm sorry. So I don't know how much you've heard already, but I'm just saying that it's been we thought it just made a lot of sense to come together and join forces, to work together in the face of this huge challenge that the whole world is confronted with. We had our own programs, but as Pan-African organizations, each one of us, we thought, that we would make a much more impactful intervention if we join forces together. And I think the pandemic has really uncovered, as it has been often noted, all the contradictions, all the problems with the system that that has been dominating the world, and all the problems also within our own continent and our own societies. We just, I think I'm not sure in the part of the world where you are today, but what we have been experiencing in Senegal over the last 2 days is a heavy downpour of rain, right? That has been just continuously going on, and that has, flooded homes and schools, and exams have been interrupted in some instances. And so, and that's in one part of the continent. In another part of the continent, we know that there are locusts, in East Africa, ravaging harvests have been, eaten up, and then, with a threat and the risk of food security becoming an even greater challenge to a large number of people. And so if you have floods, it means problems of housing, problems of food, and all those things together, and health issues coming into that. The point I'm making here is that the pandemic actually adds to other problems, and the people who are responding to the pandemic have also all these other challenges to respond to. So it's a development challenge, it's a challenge of poverty, but at the end of it all, the burden has been overly carried by the poor communities, marginal communities, those who are the majority in the cities and who are working in the informal sectors, as has been said. And I think the packages, as has been also explained, have not been really taking into account that fact, that simple fact of life. Now, I think also another part of the current situation is, for those who've been following the current affairs in this continent, there's been a coup d'etat in Mali just over a week ago. And that came after a series of demonstrations. People are tired of the insecurity, tired of the poverty, tired of all the problems that they're facing. And the whole of the Sahel region is in a tension that we don't know where it's going to lead. So problems of governance, problems of conflict, problems of poverty, problems of livelihoods are all mixed up, and same communities are the ones that are grappling with all these problems. And I think what we have been doing in our respective organizations is to try to find entry points into all these big challenges the continent is faced with. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic has been also a moment when all these things come together in some particular way, and then we are into it. Now, if you're talking about how do we relate the response, not only the response to the pandemic, but the transition out of the pandemic to a post-pandemic world that is much better, that doesn't have the problems we have now, to our more fundamental imperatives of transformation, structural transformation that this continent is confronted with. I think the first question is, when does the transition begin? By all indications, it is going to be a long transition. Hopes went up at one point, and then you see the pandemic reoccurring again, and the figures going up in other places, new cycles emerging. And we know that we don't have a vaccine yet, and probably so long as there's no vaccine, we cannot say we are really into the post-pandemic period. So you have all these issues that we have to deal with, and at the same time, we have been invited to live with the idea and to prepare ourselves to be in this uncertain period of uncertainty over the long haul, at the minimum, probably up to the middle of next year, or if not beyond that. So the issues we have to deal with is, how do we now link the effort to grapple with the challenges posed by the pandemic, but also to the effort to get out of the challenges the pandemic in a way that sort of helps our societies to live better and to overcome some of the problems that they've been confronted with. The pandemic, historically, pandemics have been moments of transition, of usually sometimes even major transitions into new dispensations, politically and otherwise. Now, I think when it comes to this particular pandemic, we are talking about the poor and the marginalized more generally, but even among the poor, there are groups that are even more seriously impacted, that have been suffering from discrimination of all kinds. All these so-called DWD communities that are living with discrimination based on work and descent. And these are people of low caste, they're people of slave origins, and then there are all the displaced people and migrant communities who are not small in numbers in any kind of way, and they're not marginal in any kind of way in terms of their numbers. So all these people are really in a dire situation, and so the question is, they are impacted upon negatively. We are not going back to the post-pandemic period. We are not entering the post-pandemic period even at the same level as we were before the pandemic, because inequalities have gotten worse. New inequalities have emerged through the crisis, and the response even to the crisis, because lockdowns, as has been noted, have actually made people lose jobs. They have made people, experience, harder conditions of life. So we are not entering the post-pandemic period at the same level. We are probably beginning from a lower level in many instances. And secondly, one of the big issues on the agenda will be access to the vaccines that are being developed now. And who has access to those vaccines? Will the marginal community be in a position to have access to the, to the quality vaccines at an affordable price? or will it be also the subject of a struggle? I think we have to be vigilant and make sure that, again, at that level, the poor and the marginalized and the informal sector workers and all of them will not be left out. Secondly, another illustration of the fact that we are not actually even starting from where we left off, where the pandemic found us, is the whole issue of education. During the lockdowns and the closure of schools and universities, a number of people, who could afford it and were in the conditions where it was possible, we are getting, classes online, and distance learning was the way to deal with the closure of schools. Now, that actually is not the case for most of people on the continent and for most people all around the world. And by the way, the issues we're talking about in the context of Africa are actually relevant to many other parts of the world. They are relevant to marginal communities of different parts of the world altogether. I think the third issue I want to say is that in all these situations, what we have seen also is an extraordinary display of creativity. I think Masego has made that point, but the creativity and innovation in the way people have been dealing with the crisis, and people have been coping, and I think that is the thing to build upon. That is the strength actually to build upon. Organizations have been very ingenious and very creative in the way they are dealing with the crisis. Individuals have been very, very creative. We've seen also the best of humanity showing up. If the spirit of Ubuntu, or Nite, as they say in Wolof, is, I feel that actually I cannot live alone. We have a shared humanity, and humanity can only be better if it is a shared humanity. I mean, that has also been seen in the context of this crisis, and I think that's the basis for building new relationships of solidarity between our communities, but also globally. Now, the solutions that have worked, in the context of other pandemics like Ebola, are the solutions that took the communities not as only recipients of aid, but also as actors of, their own emancipation of the solutions, as part of the solution to the problems, because they know the environments where they live, they know what plants can work, what you can eat to become stronger. They have knowledges that can be mobilized in the response to the pandemic. So I think that's also one of the building blocks of the post-COVID response, period. I think the third thing I want to say is that definitely, if you're talking about shared humanity and in new relations of solidarity, is to come back to the point I made earlier about discrimination and interhuman relationships. We need to have different attitudes, particularly towards the people who are experiencing all kinds of marginalization and discrimination on the basis of race, on the basis of caste, on the basis of descent or gender, or otherwise within our communities. Now, the context in which we are discussing this is a context of widespread poverty in the context of Africa. It's a context of economic structural dependence in terms of the way our economies are hooked to the rest of the world that put us at the receiving end of the world. We know Africa has all the resources that can be the basis for the transformation and for everybody to live well, not only within the continent, but also even beyond the continent. But we know also that is subject of a huge scramble and of a huge struggle, that those resources are there's a competition for them, the human resources, the intellectual resources, the natural resources, that are concentrated on this continent, that can be a basis for liberating everybody and making life better for everybody, are being actually contested and competed for and being alienated in all kinds of ways. So I think we need a development process, a transformation process that will make sure that it is built upon the resources that we have, human resources, the knowledges and everything, at the same time to done in such a way that it doesn't leave anybody behind them. That's the slogan of the objectives of Millennium Development Goals. Not Millennium Development Goals, Sustainable Development Goals, right? And leaving nobody behind. To leave nobody behind, it means therefore you take everybody seriously as an actor of their own emancipation. You listen to them, you develop relationships. And that happens with organizations, and that's the other point I want to make. Community organizations exist. Civil society organizations and social movements have been relating with these marginal communities over the long haul before COVID, and they've been continuing during COVID. Now, those are the ones that the people know, they trust, right? And they need to be strengthened to be able to continue to work also in the process of transformation to get the best out of the communities. Another important issue, therefore, is the whole issue of transformation, as I said. That should be a transformation of our economies. We need to industrialize. That's speaking, in broad terms. But industrialization can start small. There is all the crafts that exist in the informal sector, the great things that people are able to do in the informal sector They need the support, they need the organizational, improvements. They need a lot of things that can help in transitioning into new modes and better quality products coming from the sector as well as part of the industrialization process. Agriculture has to have to go through a transformation. There is something circulating on the web these days because a former politician of the industrialized countries, I don't want to name the name because it's a controversial name that has provoked a lot of, controversies not so long ago, has come up with a book recently. And in this book, one of the things he's making as a big argument is that actually the world's biggest problem today is not the problem of climate or any other problem, it's the problem of population. And all the examples are drawn from Africa, which within a few decades will be more than 2 billion. And that he's saying that, look, you know what, if Europe doesn't wake up to that particular reality and do something about it, the migration crisis that is being discussed is actually, they should not say, it hasn't even begun yet. Because these people will not only stay on the continent, they'll invade the rest of the world, basically. That's in substance what he was saying. For our own purposes, we have also questions to answer. We have issues of food security. Where will people live? What are the issues? The schools that the children are going to go to? Where will they find jobs? How do we organize? There is serious thinking to have in the way I think we need to think about the future of this continent.
Yes. Let me just hold you there because I wanted you to connect with a question that has been posed already by one of our listeners. We have 39 people in the forum, and I wanted you to connect to the economic issues that you've just raised before I go to Maseko and Stigmata to speak specifically on what colleagues who are listening now can do in terms of supporting this whole initiative. And the question posed says, how will the African youth cope with the new normal that we are envisaging, and what will be the future strategies that we should take to make the economy work? So I thought you could just conclude by tying up on the question come in the forum, and then I would like to move to Maseko and Stigmata on what people can do.
Well, thanks, Briggs, and thanks to the person who asked that great question. Look, the African youth is actually the key actor that we are talking about of the transformation that we are calling for, because they are the majority in terms of numbers of the population. It is the most dynamic section of the population. It is also the population whose future is at stake, basically, who need to make sure that we have a future on this continent and not conjugate our future in terms of somewhere else in other parts of the world. You have to make a living here. And this youth is extremely resourceful. The youth is extremely dynamic. They have been at the forefront of all the changes that have occurred on the continent now. And that youth, what they need is, I think, the support to be able to, get the skills where they need skills, to get the education where they need education. And definitely, it is not youth that has to wait for tomorrow to lead, because they're already playing an extremely important leadership role in the response to the crisis already, as we can see in many places. But also, it's a youth for today and for tomorrow. So the youth definitely is the section of our community that we're talking about, who are the huge majority of all the populations of Africa, and it is this youth who actually, I think, have been extremely resourceful. Depending on, if you look at the arts, they are the ones who are in all the groups doing great things. Look at the new technologies. They are in the new technology engaged in an extremely important way, doing great things. And so definitely the youth should be part of the transformation process, and they should be actually playing a leading role in the transformation process, because they are the force for change, and they are the future, I think, of the change we're looking for. I just want to say one last thing to relate this whole problem of change and youth and the context in which we are, and to say that we have in our history and in our cultures a lot that actually speaks to these issues of solidarity that you're talking about. I'm not sure whether we're talking about a new normal. The new normal. Certainly, what we had was not normal. You yourself, the moderator said it. We had the abnormal being normalized. We don't want that anymore. We want to build a new world, basically, a new world where all these inequalities do not exist, where the injustices do not exist, where people have a say and have a possibility to participate. But in that context, I think it's not only about ourselves, human beings relating to each other, including men and women, the younger and the not so young, the youth and the others. It's also about us and the other inhabitants of this planet. It's us and the environment surrounding us. in the Mandate Charter is a document that was adopted in what is present-day Mali, where this crisis is. In present-day Mali, in the 13th century already, a document was adopted that's still very relevant in many respects, and it's a contemporary of the Magna Carta of Britain. The article number 1 of the Mandate Charter is every life is a life, right? Which means that we value all forms of life, we value relationships with the environment, with nature, we value the ecological issues as much as anybody should ought to value them. And I think that's how we should think about the future, a future in which it is not an anthropocentric future we are imagining, a human-centered future, a human-centered world that sort of is done at the expense of everything else. That won't be sustainable. That has actually brought us all the problems we have today. But it's also a future that is not only androcentric. It means that taking men to be the people who should be ruling and dominating everything, but one that is based on equality and reciprocity and solidarity among all its components. I think I should just stop there because I can go on for a long time on these issues.
Thank you, Ebrima. And I think you affirm very well the point that moments of crisis such as these are also moments of great opportunity for transformation. So thank you for framing things with such a long-term perspective to it. I invite again, if there are those who need any clarifications or have specific questions, please type them in the chat room. I acknowledge the comments that we have received, affirming and supporting the process. Nancy Kachingwe, wonderful to see you there, and thanks for your comments. Thanks, Ebrima, for mentioning the youth. We have to remember that 50% of Africa's population is under 20 years old, and half of these young people are not finishing secondary school education, and there's no plan to cater for this demographic reality, particularly as it relates to public expenditure and allocations. Thank you so much for your extraordinary work coming from Bobby. I had noted also an earlier comment to Masejo's input. Thank you, Masejo, for emphasizing how the pandemic has been such a huge demonstration of African agency, solidarity, and innovation at the grassroots. The pandemic has made us realize that the only way forward is African solutions for African problems. Also great to see these collaborations. Well done. Thanks, Nancy, for that. There are details that have been shared in the chat, including the website, where you can access a lot more information on our community immunity. But let me go to Stigmata and close with Masejo. What can colleagues who are listening do to be a part of this most inspiring journey?
Thank you, Briggs, and thank you, my colleagues, for the discussion you have carried earlier. And thank you, the audience, for questions and comments. And I think for me, what I wanted to say is that we really need a stronger infrastructure that would support the complex challenges, complex issues in the continent, complex issues which are even deepened by the COVID pandemic. And for that to happen, I think we all need to start with shifting our mindset. Shifting our mindset from the one that make us feel we can do it by ourselves, and that is very much working in silos. Shifting from that of institutions believing that they can achieve their specific missions by themselves, to and therefore having very limited investment which cannot really uproot the complex issues in the continent, to the one that will help us to build a broader ecosystem which is speaking together, which is looking for real impact in the continent. So we have started, and we said we really wanted to co-create a broader platform, a broader network of partners who will take these issues together, a broader platform which is going to give the voice to the marginalized, the voice to the power to the voice to the marginalized, and the power to the community members to drive their own development. So I believe that for us, the connection, the collaboration, the working together the sisterhood and brotherhood, I wanted to say. We should really cherish the values of our own giving, our own support, the solidarity values, the values of Ubuntu, for us to be able to continue and working together. You sit where you sit, you have resources that you have. We have to build better from the capacities to assets to connections. So Ubuntu should be the value that drive our conversation to build better after COVID, but also to respond to the urgent needs of our community, and also to put our community members at the driver's seat. I think for me, those who are making grants, those who are making any support or any help, a human being should be at the center of any development we want to drive, should be at the center of us building better after COVID and being able to prepare and have a better resilience for us to respond as civil society to any pandemic or any crisis that might arise coming forward and sustain the efforts through the community. So community ownership, thank you so very much.
Thank you, Stigmata. Let me switch to Masejo. If you can also give us your last word. What can we do? How can everyone be a part of this journey? And what's your last word?
Yeah. My last word is one, to echo what both Stigmata and Ibrima have said. And the starting point is around, what Ibrima was saying when he said we are stronger in numbers. And when we work as a collective towards our shared humanity. Stigmata has echoed that, and she's speaking about Ubuntu. But how do you do that in practical terms and become part of this community immunity movement? Is to go onto our website. I see Letu and Abda have already provided the link. And under there, you'll find a page that says petition with us. And what it basically does is it allows you to put in your details in there so that you can stand with us in solidarity and you join hands with this community for the betterment of marginalized peoples across the African continent. By adding your name, you're actually saying you endorse the messaging of this initiative, but you're also saying you want to be part of the process of ideation, right? When we talk about building back, when we talk about debunking this thing about coming back to an old normal and want to position ideas about what an alternative pathways to inclusive development look like. It actually comes about as we convene in settings like this, share ideas about what is working, share ideas about the aspirations of people on the ground, and share insights on the future that people want to see. So we'd like for you to please sign up so that you don't miss out on the opportunities and you can bring to the table your own insights, your own resources and experiences from the various networks that you belong to. The second thing is we are mobilizing resources for this. Our target is to raise $10 million that would go towards supporting the NGOs, supporting the different frontline organizations that are working on these issues, the informal traders we spoke about, the small scale farmers, young people, women, in the associations that they organize themselves with. In the startup of this campaign, we are targeting to mobilize $1.5 million. We've already secured $500,000 from the Open Society Foundations, and we are reaching out to people in different pockets of society to help us meet that target, including reaching the 10 million target that I spoke about. Lastly is around volunteering services, and where we need support is in connecting on the resource mobilization side, but also connecting in the establishment of strategic partnerships with the corporate sector, with young people who are driving innovation, with academia, with organic thought leaders who've been thinking about, what a future inclusive social and economic order looks like. So we're really inviting you to please join us in this movement, and there is many ways in which you can make a contribution. It is not only through the hard cash, It's in your solidarity. It's in you turning up for these events, sharing stories, amplifying the voices of the continent, and demonstrating that agency that we spoke about earlier. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Masego, and thanks for making your closing remarks in a way that makes me feel like you spoke on behalf of everyone. So I would not be coming back to Stigmata and Ebrima, unless if there's like, you know, something super burning from your end, but I feel like Masego has really taken us, you know, befittingly to the top of the hour. So it remains upon me to really thank our panelists, Ebrima, the Executive Director for Trust Africa, Stigmata, the Executive Director of African Philanthropy Network, and Masego, the Executive Director for Southern Africa Trust, for really framing the issues for us in such, you know, very compelling and powerful terms. I would also want to thank the listeners who were able to join us from all over the world. I hope you found the conversation and the introduction to community immunity worth it. I particularly noted as part of your comments, Nancy, where you say the only way forward is African solutions for African problems. And sometimes that's something that's misunderstood, but African solutions for African problems simply mean a contextual solution. And I think the conversation that we had today was all about the specificity of the African context and the importance of institutions such as those speaking to us today, of being on the forefront of finding those solutions. And you are all invited to support the process. Thanks Letu, thanks Abda, thanks Ilana for sharing the way that colleagues can connect, communityimmunity.org. There's a lot more information that you can find there in terms of how you can become a part of this journey. So thank you very much to everyone behind the scenes, everyone who's showed up for this, for being a part of the process. Please look out for information on the next in this series of webinars. Have a wonderful day. You can switch on your mic and say goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye. Thanks for joining us.
Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
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 So, I go. You know?
Mm-hmm.
So we continue our meeting now?
I don't know if it is the same link or.
Is the same link or we do it? Huh? Is it? ¿Cómo se ve?
No, va a quitar.
Okay, we'll do it. All right? Go ahead.